Is there bias in social media? I believe the evidence is overwhelmingly yes. The question is, what is the best response? Should we limit free speech in the name of protecting it? And what happens when governments pick winners and losers in the arena of free speech? We don't have to hypothesize because the test has already been run, and we are reaping the harvest of asking government to protect us from our rights. So let's discuss this next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution and we teach the rising generation to be free. I am glad you could join me today. As always, please head to that website, constitutionstudy.com. Find out everything that's going on here at the Constitution Study, all the work that we're doing, the places we'll be speaking. I'm going to be in North Dakota, I think it's August 8th at Midwest Freedom Fest. So, hey, join us there. I'm also looking to put on some other in-person events as the country kind of wakes up from its COVID lethargy. You can also sign up for the newsletter. If you're on the newsletter, you're one of the first to find out what's going on here at the Constitution Study. I only send out one email a month, so it's not spamming your inbox. But what you can do is check the box to have these messages delivered directly to your inbox as soon as they're published. Don't worry about Facebook or Google algorithms. Just have it delivered directly to you. And with that, let's talk about this freedom of speech. I was going through my list of ideas when I stumbled across an article about President Trump's executive order on preventing online censorship. Now, I had planned to write an article about this EO back when it was released in May. But circumstances, well, they overtook us. So now that I've come back to this order, I wanted to look at the proper way of dealing with bias in the media, social and otherwise. Now, from the executive order on preventing online censorship, quote, "Free speech is the bedrock of American democracy. Our founding fathers protected this sacred right with the First Amendment to the Constitution. The freedom to express and debate ideas is the foundation for all our rights as a free people." Now, America is a republic, not a democracy, Mr. President. And not only is free speech the bedrock of our society, but other freedoms of expression as well. These freedoms of expression and conscience are protected at the federal level by the First Amendment to the Constitution. Quoting, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." I say the First Amendment protects us from federal interference with our freedom of expression because it starts with the words, "Congress shall make no law." Congress is the name of the federal legislature. So an act not based on a law made by Congress cannot violate the First Amendment. However, this protection of expression is so important that, as I understand it, each and every state provides its own protections for it in their own constitutions. For example, my home state of Tennessee, from our Constitution, Article 1, Section 19 reads, quote, "The free communication of thoughts and opinions is one of the invaluable rights of man, and every citizen may freely speak, write, and print on any subject, being responsible for the abuse of that liberty." Our ability to express ideas contrary to the view of those in government, media, academia, and anyone with a different point of view, it's more than just a way of making us feel better. By expressing ideas contrary to current popular sentiment and orthodoxy, by engaging in debate about controversial subjects, we open the possibility of a search for truth. From Galileo's theory that the earth revolved around the sun to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of a land where people are judged by the content of their character, the ability to express unpopular ideas have been the bedrock by which we have struggled to find the truth. Without the freedom to speak and publish unpopular ideas, we would still think the earth is flat, that black and Jewish people are subhuman, and that no one could travel faster than the speed of sound. These are just a few of the ideas once thought heretical and unacceptable in certain quarters. But what do we do when powerful actors use their influence to stifle such an important freedom? Now, none of us like having our ideas challenged. We get our backs up at the mere mention of an idea that contradicts our own. So it should be no surprise that people have used the power of government to enforce their orthodoxy on others for centuries. Galileo was tried and found guilty of heresy. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was harassed by both his government and those who wanted a more militant response to racist laws. But it didn't stop there. Today, scientists who disagree with climate change are shunned, and many who publish their papers are fired. Teachers have lost their jobs for expressing ideas that offended some crowd, ideas that often have been supported by science and history. In recent weeks, we've seen everyone from corporate heads to newspaper editors fired or forced to resign for even allowing an idea that does not follow the orthodoxy of certain groups to see the light of day. The country where citizens once proudly proclaimed, "I may vehemently disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it," now screams with hysteria at the mere exposure to ideas they don't like. In short, freedom of expression is on life support in America today. It is under attack by government officials who want certain speech criminalized as hate speech, by an education system that tells our children and young adults they have the right not to be exposed to anything that might bother them, by a media that determines what the people should and should not see, and the latest entry into this cabal of thought police, social media companies who want to control what information flows through their systems in order to influence politics and public opinion. The question I have is, what should we do about these opponents to free expression and the unbridled search for truth? The answer for those who don't want to hear what they don't like has always been a form of speech police. Whether government actors, religious organizations, or other people of influence, the ability to control what other people write and say, usually in an effort to control what other people think, has a long history in this world and in this country. From people who called for the outlawing of mixed marriages to those who want climate deniers banned from the public square. From the Code of Practices for TV and the Motion Picture Production Code to those who want to ban any opposition to Black Lives Matter. From the legalized racism of Jim Crow laws to the banning of any religious symbols in public, these are just a few of the examples of how the American people have used speech police in one form or another to prevent opposing ideas from gaining traction. And before you turn up your nose at the foibles of our predecessors, let us remember why President Trump has issued this order. See, originally we treated Facebook, Twitter, Google, and the other tech giants as open platforms. We decided that as long as they were just the medium the information traversed, we would not hold them accountable for what was said. This is in the form of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Now, are these companies now using their system to manipulate what information is promoted and what is censored? Yes. But remember, if it was not started by the cries from the American people, it certainly was accelerated by them. Yes, the CEOs of these and other technology companies have been called to testify before Congress, in no small part because the people were complaining about how they censored speech. But if you remember, the original concern was that these companies were not censoring hate speech or other posts that some thought might incite violence. That's right, the American people, both directly and through their representatives in Congress, demanded that these tech giants censor expression they did not like. Is it really a surprise that once these companies were not only allowed but expected to censor expression, that this power would be used to the disadvantage of some? We forgot the most basic rule of writing regulations: assume they will be turned against you. We asked these companies to censor hate speech, but we failed to define what that is. You see, all speech is hateful to someone. Then we asked them to fact-check political posts, not thinking that in today's society, just about everything is political. And since we did not provide a standard by which facts should be checked, once again we gave a loaded gun to someone to protect us, only to have it turned back on us. We asked these companies to place their fingers on the scales of justice and are shocked to find out that the very tools we gave them are being used against us. And now that these giant tech companies have pointed their guns at certain political and social ideas in our society, ideas that are cherished by so many Americans, what is our answer? For President Trump and for most of the people I've heard talk about it, the answer is to hand a larger gun to the federal government. From the executive order on preventing online censorship, quote, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube wield immense, if not unprecedented, power to shape the interpretation of public events, to censor, delete, or disappear information, and to control what people see or do not see. As president, I have made clear my commitment to free and open debate on the internet. Such debate is just as important online as it is in our universities, our town halls, and our homes. It is essential to sustaining our democracy. In his executive order, President Trump says that free speech is the bedrock of American democracy, that he is committed to free and open debate. Then he complains that certain companies use their speech to influence others. Isn't that the purpose of free speech? Again, from the executive order, quote, "Online platforms are engaging in selective censorship that is harming our national discourse. Tens of thousands of Americans have reported, among other troubling behavior, online platforming's flagging content as inappropriate, even though it does not violate any stated terms of service, making unannounced and unexplained changes to company policies that have the effect of disfavoring certain viewpoints, and deleting content and entire accounts with no warning, no rationale, and no recourse." Again, we see the American people looking to government to be the bully. They do not like the way these companies are treating their data, and their solution is to get the government to force these companies to behave the way they want. They are using the government to do what they claim is being done to them. Either comply with our wishes, express the ideas we believe are right, or have control of your property taken away from you. And make no mistake, that is exactly what President Trump's order, Congress's proposed legislation, and other calls to regulate these tech giants are. Either enforce our orthodoxy or be taken over. What very few people seem to realize is that once you give the government the power to control what speech must and must not be allowed, you have given them the Orwellian power to regulate free speech. Is this really any different than California's demand that pro-life pregnancy centers must advertise for abortion clinics? Are we calling for these companies and their owners to recant what they believe, just as the Inquisition did to Galileo back in the 1600s? Why? Why are the American people doing this? Why are people demanding that the government regulate the speech of private companies, and by extension, the people who own them? For the very same reason so many people love term limits. They want to force other people to comply with their wishes. See, no one is forcing you to use Facebook, Twitter, Google, Apple, or any of the services these companies provide. More importantly, no one is preventing you from using other services to either don't censor their data or do so with a different bias. The president is wrong. These companies have no power to control what you do and do not see, only what you see on their platform. Have these companies violated their terms of service? Well, the evidence I've seen so far seems to say so, but that is a problem the federal government has created. You see, by granting these companies immunity without defining or defending the limits that were put on them, the government has denied the American people a redress for their grievances against these companies. By allowing these companies to editorialize through their filters and promotions, while at the same time protecting them from lawsuits for their malicious practices, it is the government who has denied you your rights. And these are the same people you want to regulate free speech in this country? As I said, these companies have no control over what information you receive, only what information transits their platform. There's a reason why I no longer watch Fox News, CNN, or MSNBC, why I no longer listen to Rush Limbaugh or Mark Levin, and why I do not rely on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Parler, or a myriad of other sources for news. Why? Well, in my eyes, they have been weighed and found wanting. They are not a trusted resource, and I no longer rely on them solely for news. I consume various news feeds from various sources, something that is extremely easy to do in today's information age. I then vet the individual stories and thereby regulate my news. You are free to search how to consume data from any source you wish, but that would take a little more work, wouldn't it? And I guess the American people have become too lazy to do more than sit around and be fed the gruel those in Silicon Valley think is best for them. And rather than using their free speech to convince others of their opinion, they are more than willing to hand over their rights to a government to regulate their lives. We fought a war 244 years ago to protect our rights from government. Today, it seems most Americans are more than happy to hand them back over and live as slaves. So, what do you think? Have you taken time to sit and think how best to deal with bias in the media, social media, corporate media, television, online? What have you thought about it? And have you thought about the consequences of what happens when we ask someone else to control the speech of others? See, if we truly believe in freedom of speech and freedom of the press, that means you have to give that freedom to everyone, including those we disagree with. And if we don't like what they say, why do we listen to them? If you think Facebook and Twitter are manipulating the news, why do you get your news from them? And if you think the media is giving you biased news, why do you watch Fox or CNN, read the New York Times or the Washington Post? Why? Why do we give power to those we know are manipulating us over us? Have we become so lazy that the idea of getting information from other sources is too much work? Yes, services from Google and Apple and Facebook and Twitter, they make your life easy. But what is information worth? I'm reminded of the story of the two air travelers. A gentleman sitting next to a very lovely woman who propositions her for a night of passion for the price of $1 million. After some moral struggle, the woman finally agrees. By the time they land, the man looks at her and says, "Listen, I lied to you. I don't have $1 million. I have $100. Will you give me a night of passion for $100? And she said, "What kind of woman do you think I am?" His response was, "We know what kind of woman you are. Now we're haggling over the price." Americans, what are the price for your liberty? Is ability to use Google Docs or Google Maps worth your freedom of speech? Is going to Google search rather than DuckDuckGo or any of the other search engines, is it really worth it? Is keeping in touch on Facebook rather than some other platform really worth your liberty? Or would you much rather just force them to comply with your orthodoxy and really be no different than the Spanish Inquisition? That's the question before us. And it's not an easy one. Well, actually, the question is easy. The work may be hard, but not as hard as you think. If you have tools for getting information other than these processes, put it in the comments below. Let other people know what these other news sources are. And if you're interested, let me know. I'll tell you where I get my news feeds, and I'll tell you how I aggregate them and how I go about searching for news. I obviously get news because I talk about it here on the channel. But if the answer to bad speech is regulating speech rather than better speech, freedom of speech is dead. We might as well pull the plug. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope it made you think. I hope you'll take some time to consider not only what news you consume, but why you consume it there. And I hope I'll see you again here next time on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand.